2 months after the end of our ethnographic project, the designer that we had left behind to implement the results of our work sends me this text. I had a workshop about co-creation with the team, and guess what happened? They asked me if it's okay to talk to people about their wishes and then make an artifact without users, since others know better. This designer was supposed to implement, after a hugely labor-intensive ethnographic project, a co-creation process aimed to make visible and bridge the distance between two groups, the developers and the users, that had produced several failing digital technologies. Upon receiving this text, I felt a sense of despair, as I remember the mechanics telling me, "We have been telling them for years that this doesn't work. What makes you think you can do better?" A little over a year before that, 3 anthropologists, me one of them and Anna the second, and the same designer started an ethnographic project in the engineering and maintenance hangars of an aviation company, observing how the various technological tools introduced to help the mechanics failed consistently to do so. The project did not really start with an assumption of failed technology, but quite the opposite. The low usage rate of the new tools was assumed to come from an inability of the mechanics to make the switch from paper to iPad. The iPad was filled with different apps built in the last 3 years as part of a digital transformation project to increase the efficiency of the mechanics' work. We built our project as an ethnography with observations and thick descriptions. We saw the failures of technology as well as the invisibility of their cause to everyone involved. The mechanics blaming the developers, the business people blaming the mechanics, and ourselves, thinking that the solution relied on making all of this visible through our anthropological expertise. The first 2 invisibilities were easier to see and uncover than a third, our own. As you will see from the following story, the technology failed again and again to help the mechanics, as it was built on an idealized perception of the practice of work, thus leading to multiple disconnects between the technology and the practice, and the mechanics and the practice.
Yeah, for example, the mechanics work with a new airplane model, the Boeing 787. The 787 is very different than older airplane models in that various tasks previously conducted manually by the mechanics are now digitized and completed by the airplane itself. This changes the work of the mechanics, who are now more preoccupied with monitoring the work from a distance. The plane itself relies on data acquired through sensors throughout the plane, which then runs through a network of fiberglass. The problem here is that the data is not always accurate because fiberglass is easily damaged, while this data production happens through a black box performance. However, the mechanics also need accurate data to monitor the completion of the task successfully. For instance, the plane's data noted that a sunscreen was broken, while the mechanic, with years of work experience, could immediately see that it was actually working perfectly. However, the hangar's entire organization is built around the premise that all technology works and all data is accurate. The mechanic was thus expected to fix something that was not at all broken. Evident here is a rigidity in the technology as well as the organization of the work. The technology does not allow the mechanic to proceed with business as usual without breaking some rules. Furthermore, stakeholders and developers also work with KPIs that are directly retrieved from the very same inaccurate data, for example, how long it takes to complete a task. This leads to a vicious cycle of rigidity. Although mechanics work with failing technologies, stakeholders are only informed that mechanics are not meeting expectations, but not why. Hence, the conclusion is quickly drawn that mechanics are lazy, dumb, and unreliable, which is to be solved with even more digital investments. This means that, while the mechanics' agency and craft knowledge might be more needed than ever for AI development, it appears to be less necessary to stakeholders and developers, something that needs to be actively minimized. Developers take this assumption and then translate it into new products. Evident here is a reification of knowledge. Developers view knowledge as a set of universal, static, and easily transferable laws. While this approach facilitates writing machine executable statements, it disregards the situational and sometimes messy reality in which mechanics apply their craft knowledge. To developers, this isn't knowledge at all. The irony here is that knowledge reification depoliticizes developers, who identify themselves as objective experts. It obscures how their ideas on objective knowledge are themselves embedded with bias. How then can we ensure that AI improves rather than silences valuable knowledge production? And what does this mean for our understanding of expertise?
This was essentially what we told the company. After 1 year in the hangar, we wrote a report. We produced visual artifacts and held many presentations showing the multiple failures of technology and the need for the developers and mechanics to come together to develop effective products. Therefore, one of our main recommendations was to start a process of co-creation, and our designer remained with the team to help set that up. What neither of us saw at the time was how the reification of our own expertise prevented us to see the role we played in perpetuating this system of invisibility. We were serving the ideology that objective knowledge can magically solve problems if only the right information is presented in the right way to those responsible. This poses a variety of problems because it obscures how such knowledge is produced and creates effect in the first place. The social fabric of the group gets affected by this by classifying certain forms of knowledge over the other, even though the reality of practice shows otherwise. The following project, after this one of 1 year that we've been telling you about right now, found us with two of the same anthropologists, me and Anna, two designers, and a desire to experiment differently with our learnings. We ran the ethnographic process as a series of participant self-reflections on the topic that we were supposed to observe. It ended with co-creation sessions like this one, where we brought the self-reflections to the group itself, and we gave them the task to lead the next steps. In this way, we were trying to make explicit that the production and co-production of knowledge is a responsibility of the entire group. In order to put the practice at the center of social groups, social groups need to walk together the path of understanding, acting, and building. Understanding does not come with putting the expertise role on a specific actor, but through the experience of producing and reproducing it by the group itself. So, through this phenomenological manner of producing knowledge, we can see a potential way out of breaking this vicious cycle of rigidity that prevents technology of working with us and for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.